military in Afghanistan before, if they were gonna torture terrorists daw, ilan na i-play ng Barney song? Ang mga terrorists daw, sige, ano ba? Alam mo, kag balik-balik, and they are being terrorized. So anyway, on your own effort, you and I cannot save ourselves. You cannot go to heaven based on our own strength, based on our own flesh. Okay? So Jesus said, you should not be surprised at my saying, you must be born again. Now, once again, I'm going to ask you this question. Is this an option or an absolute condition? Absolute condition. So therefore, you have to change your perspective. Change the way you think and change the way you act. You cannot do this on your own. There should be somebody who will put this onto you. That's the reason why you have to understand that Jesus is sovereign. On your own, you cannot do this. When we define sovereignty, it's an adjective. It's how you describe a person or a thing. Jesus is sovereign, meaning He possesses the supreme or ultimate power to do this. So that's why change your perspective. You have to understand and embrace God's sovereignty. Do you follow? Okay, tell your seatmate, Jesus is sovereign. Change your perspective. Okay, let's continue. Jesus further explains to Nicodemus so that he can understand. The wind blows wherever it pleases. You hear its sound, but you cannot tell where it comes from or where it is going. So it is with everyone born of the Spirit. Now, you have to understand this. How do you know that person is born of the Spirit? That neighbor of yours, grabe ka pala hubog na siya kuya, grabe ka pumalikas, kakulataho niya yung mga igsuon. And when he came to this church, he embraced this faith that is new to him, all of a sudden he was changed. Have you seen the spirit of that person? No. Have you seen the changes in the life of the person? That's the work of the Spirit. Same thing with the wind. You cannot see the wind, right? This is what Jesus explains to Nicodemus. Diba? You cannot see the Spirit, just like the wind. But you will know that there's the wind because you can feel the cool breeze that it brought. And you will know nga, gikan siya din here. So, kumaana yung buhok. So, the wind comes from here. But you don't know exactly where will it come from the next time around. Right? Even pag-asa sometimes make a mistake. Okay? So that's the thing. How do you know that person is being born again if you saw the changes in his life? Just like the leaves. Diba? Ang leaves, they will move when the wind blows. Now, you have to think of this. Did Nicodemus understand? Did he understood? Or he was just refusing to understand? Unless you and I view this from God's perspective by accepting that He is indeed sovereign over our lives, it's difficult for us to change our perspective. Because if you're going to look at this, Nicodemus once again asked this question, Rabbi, how can it be? Nicodemus is a teacher of the law. He's the member of the Sanhedrin. When you say Sanhedrin, he's on top of it. A question that denotes it's impossible. How can this be? This question, it's as if telling Jesus it's impossible. Because he refused to accept. That's the reason why we have to change our perspective and understand and appreciate Jesus' sovereignty. Are you with me? Okay, let's continue. Change your perspective because Jesus is sovereign. Jesus knows better. Just like Nicodemus, you and I cannot outsmart Him with our own limited, finite minds. We have intellectual limitations. God is infinite and He is sovereign. He controls all things. He knows all things, even the secrets of your heart. Nicodemus said in verse 9, how can this be? And here's where Jesus dropped the bomb. You are Israel's teacher, and you do not understand these things? You memorize the 5 books of the law, and you don't understand what I'm talking about? I tell you the truth. We speak of what we know. Jesus is telling Nicodemus, we testify to what we have seen, but still you people do not accept our testimony. This is also other known as, marami tayong sulti siya nga, you're refusing to believe. You're just refusing to believe. That's the reason why you don't accept our testimony. And if you continue, I have spoken to you of earthly things, and you do not believe. How then will you believe if I speak of heavenly things? Anas Nicodemus. Okay? You have to understand, God is sovereign. Jesus is sovereign and we are not. So change our perspective. Align ourselves to His will. Jesus continues, no one has ever gone to heaven except the one who came from heaven. Who is He referring to? Himself, the Son of Man. And 14, this is the further explanation of Jesus, because Jesus knew, He is sovereign. So that Nicodemus could understand this further, he has to bring Nicodemus to the level of his understanding. Verse 14 tells us that just as Moses lifted up the snake in the desert, so the Son of Man must be lifted up. Now let's visit Numbers 21, 4-9. This was the time Jesus was telling Nicodemus. You're familiar with the story. Nicodemus, right? Nicodemus says, yeah. Numbers chapter 21. Okay, what happened in Numbers chapter 21? Let me just narrate the story. When Israel came out of Egypt, they experienced the glory of God. Are you with me? Okay. Imagine they saw the 10 plagues. But Egyptians were being punished. Wow. And when they came out of Egypt, they looted the Egyptians. The Egyptians gave them their bracelet, the golds, everything. And then, when they went into the desert, not yet in the desert, but they were going to exit, there's this Red Sea. They cannot pass by. And the Egyptians were chasing after them. You know what God did? He parted the Red Sea. Let the Israelites cross. And during the night, when it's cold, God provided the pillar of fire to keep them warm. These are the Israelites. They experienced God's hand. They saw God's glory. And during the day, when it's hot, when they traveled in the desert, God provided them with the pillar of cloud. And then when they crossed, after crossing the Red Sea, they began to complain. They began to grumble against God and against Moses. Grabe ka, mga walay kabalas lang ng mga tao. And so ungrateful. You know what God did? He sent venomous snakes to the camp of Israel. They beat the Israelites, and when they beat the Israelites, some of them died. Namatay. You know poisonous snakes in the desert? Some of them are rattlesnakes. You will not live for the day. Maybe 12 hours, 8 hours, you will live if you get bitten by snakes. And so many snakes. And they said, Moses, could you please plead for God in behalf of us? Please, Moses. And then Moses said, Lord, could you please save your people? And then God instructed Moses, make yourself a bronze serpent, and put it on a pole, lift it up, and anyone in the camp who was bitten will have to look at the snake. And everyone who will look at the snake will live. Does it make sense to you? Let me give you an illustration. Okay? If you're sick and you go to the doctor, sorry. I would say, doctor, just like me, doc. Ubo ko, doc. Doc, kung say, hatag ni mo tambal sa ako, doc. And the doctor will write on the prescription, and he will tell me, just look at the paper. and you will get healed. Would you believe that, doctor? Just tanawa lang eh. You will tell, Doc, you're crazy. But you know what? That's what happened. That's how God instructed the Israelites. You have to look at the bronze serpent and you will live. And eventually, those who look at the serpent live. Whoever looks at the bronze serpent lives. What made them look at the snake or the serpent is faith in God's word, in His solution. And this is exactly what Jesus is telling Nicodemus.